humor is an essential coping tool for surviving tough times. When the future looks uncertain, shared laughter gives us real strength and it can really help us feel a bit more in control. Now, recent studies have also found out that a good laugh can definitely boost our immune system. So, while funny jokes like maybe the coronavirus jokes or the quarantine jokes, they might not feel right looking at how the world is facing it today, but they eventually actually add into a lot of good for us. Yes. Now, while we of course need to take COVID-19 restrictions and the protocols seriously and follow the recommendations of different authorities, it is really okay to find a bit of humor in all of this, right? Now, as scary as the pandemic sounds, it also gives us some joke material, isn't it? So, in today's episode, we are going to understand one particular type of comedy, which is all about the current affairs or whatever is the reigning topic in the world today, right? So, I really can relate it to the coronavirus situation. And today we are going to see how we can write jokes on current affairs and current events, something which people have in their minds all the time, really. Yes, and that's why this particular subtopic of stand up comedy is one which is really relatable. Yes. Now, we will be looking at this particular type of stand up comedy in today's episode and exploring all about it. But before we move further, let me introduce myself. I am Sapna Mahadevan, public speaking expert at PlanetSpark, and I come here live every day, Monday through Saturday at 6 p.m. India time, and we explore the stand-up comedy vertical, right? You can also search in YouTube and check out all the past videos where we have spoken a lot about story writing and all the different genres that there are. From the past couple of weeks, we have been talking about stand out at stand-up comedy, and that is what is the topic for today as well. And we want all of you to explore yourself at a comic level. Yes. So let's see how we can ace the humor game. Coming up in today's episode, we have a lot of curated segments which are all fun and definitely a lot of learning. So we are going to see what stand-up comedy is all about and also understand the different essentials that we need to focus on, some pro tips on building up these essentials. And then there is the fun part where we also give you a particular scenario, and these are sort of like practical examples which will give you a better understanding of the subtopic. And then finally, we have some expert tips and tricks on how you can be writing your very own comedy set. And apart from all of this that I just now told you about, there are a lot of fun segments which definitely are going to give you a lot of learning as well. So there is the synonymous segment, decipher the idioms, which speaks about idioms, that is phrases that have a hidden meaning. And we have icebreaker questions. Every now and then it will creep up onto my screen unnoticed. And of course, you need to be all ears because there is a quiz time as well, right? So all this and more in today's episode. Do stay tuned in with me here. Let's have a wealth of information and let's explore ourselves at a comic level. Yes. I can see a lot of hellos here in the chat box. Thanks a lot for joining in. Really glad that I have all of my audience members here keenly waiting for the episode to unfold. And yes, without much ado, let's move ahead to the first segment for the day. Here it is. Guess the character is the name of the segment, and I'm going to show you some pictures. You need to guess these famous movie or cartoon characters, right? Here is the first picture, and this is really popular. Who is oh, I already have that answer there. I'm so sorry for that miss. So yes, that is Captain Hook. Maybe you can try guessing from the next picture there. My bad. And let me move ahead to the next one. There it is. Okay, so the first one that we saw was, of course, Captain Hook from Peter Pan. I'm also getting some answers here. So yes, that was Captain Hook, the pirate, the leader of the pirates, actually, right? And now we have another interesting character here. Of course, that is from Toy Story. Yes, Varun gives me the correct answer. What's the name of that character? Quickly in the chat box, the name of this popular character from Toy Story. Waiting for some. That is correct. Yes, it is Woody. There it is. Wonderful. Okay. Thanks a lot for that answer there. Anya. Okay, Mohammed. Thanks a lot for that answer there. And let's move ahead to the next one. Here it is. And we all know this character, isn't it? That's quite easy. It's going to be like a piece of cake for my audience here. And I already got some answers here. Woody is correct. Devi Prasad giving me that answer. Hello there, Devi Prasad. Thanks for joining the live. And this is the answer that they are giving me for the previous question. And we've already moved ahead to the next character. And that is all correct answers in the chat box. Yes. So J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter. That is right. And thanks again for all of these answers and for being a participative audience here. Really love to strike a conversation with all of you. And that's what is the fun part in these episodes, isn't it? Great. So let's move ahead. After that segment here, Harry Potter was the correct answer. And we move on to the next segment. What is stand-up comedy, right? So by now we all have an inkling of what stand-up comedy is all about. So let me again tell you that stand-up comedy is a performance that a comic or a comedian they do in front of a live audience, and they are wanting to put the audience in stitches. Yes, that means that they want to make the public laugh, and of course it is one of the toughest jobs in the world to make people laugh, right? And let me tell you all about the jokes that they perform on stage. These are sometimes scripted and sometimes they are spontaneous depending on the situation. And these jokes could have maybe punchlines or one liners. There could be a wordplay which gives you the humor. So there could be different elements by which the comedians try to make people laugh, right? So let me tell you that the average stand-up comedy show gets around 4 to 6 laughs a minute from the audience. Yes, so that's what is the metrics for the comedian. They are going to know if they are successful at their job or not. If they get 4 to 6 laughs a minute, then of course they are acing their game, right? So that's what stand-up comedy is all about. And definitely more than being funny and having a funny bone, we also need to understand the minute nuances of how you can be performing in public. You need to have some people skills as well. Public speaking skills of course are necessary, and we also need to try and connect with the audience so that they get what we are speaking about, right? So that's how stand-up comedy performances are really emerging these days, and become one of the lucrative careers as well. Also, let me tell you that the performer on the stage is called a comic, a comedian, and sometimes also a stand up, right? So, this is what stand up comedy is all about. And let us talk about the subtopic of the day. So, just like I told you in the initial introduction, of today's episode, I told you how coronavirus and quarantine jokes have become really popular. Yes. So these will come under topical comedy, because topical comedy means comedy or humor which is done on some headlines or current affair topics, or maybe important news which is currently happening all throughout the world maybe. And this is really one type of a popular form of stand-up comedy for late night talk variety shows. Yes, and generally they are a satire on the society, right? So that's how topical humor and topical jokes can actually be framed around specific topics related to current events. And of course, this the value of this kind of humor, it dies down quickly, it diminishes quickly, because only until when that particular news topic is in the headlines, only till then that joke is going to land, right? After probably when that news item is no longer widely discussed in public, then the humor dies down, right? So that's how topical humor, we can understand that with the current, whatever the world is facing right now, the struggles of quarantine and the coronavirus, right? And that's why I mentioned this particular type to be one of topical comedy. Yes. Now, one of the Polytechnic Academy handles joining the live here. Hello. I hope you have a lot of learning with all of these topics that we are touch basing upon today, right? And you can also give me a thumbs up in the chat box if you understand what topical comedy is all about, right? Maybe if you have any questions for me, you can post them as well in the chat box. I'll try answering them to the best of my capacity, right? So topical comedy is what we are going to explore for today. Any current affair topic that comes to your mind, maybe regarding the political scenario of the place that you live in, even that will come under topical comedy, right? Now let's move ahead and understand one of the scenarios that we have for topical comedy. So this is absurd content which gets viral on the internet, right? Now, these days you would have seen that there are a lot of platforms relating to social media where you can post your content videos, right? And apart from all the interesting maybe entertainment aspect that it provides to you, there is also a lot of information that you get. There are a lot of interesting content that you can get in these sites and in these social media platforms, right? It's also becoming a rage these days where people make absurd content, and they just have one aim, that they need to become viral, right? So that could also be one of the cases that we can be taking under consideration for a topical comedy, right? Now let me, before we move further, let me give you an icebreaker question here. Which is your favorite tree is the first icebreaker question that I have. And maybe you can quickly give me answers in the chat box. And I'm going to wait for some of the answers here. Nalini, hi. Thanks a lot for joining the live. And I'm glad that you are liking all of these episodes here. Um, yes, so let me tell you that stand-up comedy again is one vertical where you definitely need to have public speaking skills. Only then you will have the grit and the confidence to go onto a stage and perform in front of a live audience, isn't it? So this is again one of the creative ways in which children can learn public speaking skills, right? So something interesting that you're doing, you're also having fun all along the way, listening to jokes and making your own jokes maybe, right? But along with fun, you're having a lot of learning. So that's what PlanetSpark is all about. We definitely believe in having fun and learning. They all go together hand in hand, right? So that's how this is one of the verticals that we have in our um, curriculum as well. Yes. And I have Gunjan join me in today's live. Gunjan Meena, good afternoon. She says it's already evening out here. And whichever part of the world that you're watching from, good afternoon to you. Okay. So oak is the answer that I get there. Banyan is another one. I think I'm going to name the kapok tree, the gigantic tree that we find in an Amazon rainforest, right? All my students watching me here in the live, you would have all learned about communication skills. And one of the topics has been in the rainforest, isn't it? So we all know about the kapok tree, right? Great. Favorite trees coming up here. The fir tree. Okay, that's wonderful. So it has this conical shape, and that's why I think R was giving me that answer here. Wow. So, yes, let's move ahead after that icebreaker question to the next segment. And this is all about establishing the essentials. So, what are the essentials and what are the things that you need to focus on while you want to write your own comedy set or a comedy routine? Yes. So, let me give you four definite elements for today's episode here. The first one is the opening. So, of course, your introduction needs to land well. Only then your audience is going to take note of what you're speaking. Yes, just like in a storybook, it's going to be interesting, and you're going to be glued to it only if the first few pages sound interesting, isn't it? Otherwise, if it sounds boring, then you're really not going to um, pursue it any further, right? So that's in the same way, the opening is one of the essentials in a comedy set. And then we have the bits, and we also have transitions and the closer. So we saw what the opening was all about, right? The way that the comedian opens his set is what is called the opening. The audience members are really waiting all ears to hear from the comedian, right? And the way that he is going to start that comedy set is is really crucial here, because that is what is going to make or break his performance, right? So in the opening, if I want to give you an example here, then let us look at one of the scenarios or one of the themes that we are going to have for our topical comedy session of today. And this particular theme, I am going to relate it with all of these four definite elements, right? So the example that we have for today is that we all know that there has been a lot of technological advancement, and it has really made our life easier. Yes. Now, some of these advancements that we have these days, modern technology, something that we cannot be living without, right? But often we see that there is a glitch in the code, or there is some kind of problem in the app which causes us a lot of grief, right? So this is one example that we have for today's topical comedy scenario. So let's see what happens to an Uber driver in San Francisco when he follows the GPS blindly and tries to climb down some stairs only to get stuck midway, right? Isn't that hilarious when some of these navigation apps, they do this to you, right? So that's how humor can be brought into your set from a topical comedy when you choose one of the current topics which people might relate to, and it is also in you know the current world is talking about this particular topic, and that's why it becomes relatable and comprehensible to people, right? So this was one example that we have here, and we are going to follow up this example for all of the four definite elements that we see going forward, right? So before I move forward, I have Pooja Piyush Salwan here, and she gives me a like and a thumbs up. Thanks a lot for that. And now let's move ahead to the second important essential that we have to consider while we write a comedy set. So this second element is bits. Now, what do we understand by bits? Bits means nothing but small jokes that the comedian writes in his comedy routine, and every bit actually has a setup which details the characters, the situation. It talks about the setting, and probably it'll have a punchline or a one liner or some kind of a small joke which concludes, which is the funniest part of the joke, and it almost always goes against what the audience is expecting, which is going to happen, right? So whenever you catch the audience off guard, right, so that means that you are surprising them with your delivery. They do not actually forecast that the joke is going to come at this moment, and at that particular time, timing is of essence here, and at that particular time you deliver that joke and you catch your audience by surprise, right? And that is when the whole essence of that joke amplifies, right? So that's what a comedian does always. They have small jokes put into the comedy set in such a way that they are going to always see to it that the timing is just right and the audience is not expecting the joke to land at that very moment, right? So these are some tips and tricks that we need to consider while we are trying to write a comedy set. I also have RMAJ Gamer. So I think it is Sri Lakshmi behind this handle here. And thanks a lot for joining the live and for all those wonderful emojis here. Really making my day. So let's move ahead into our next scenario again here. So I'm going to now again relate that same Uber driver's experience with bits, right? So the example here was as he was driving down a pedestrian walkway, right? Just keenly observe how we are talking about an Uber driver driving down a pedestrian walkway outside a general store on Market Street, right? Now, this whole situation itself is so very funny. The driver was looking for an exit in the parking lot at the church and the Market Safeway. He claimed that it was not entirely his mistake, as the navigation app suggested him to take that way. Now, how absurd is that, right? So, the driver here is not even able to sense the situation. Of course, he saw that the navigation app gave him that direction, but certainly he could see that there were stairs. So he need not had to drive that way, isn't it? But he is also trying to justify the whole situation, and that is what is making the whole scenario here quite absurd, right? And you can see that how humor is getting incited from this situation, right? That's how we need to keenly observe a certain situation and then try and put in some kind of an event which is the talk of the town for those days, and see to it that humor gets in the way and people get a laugh, right? So this is what topical comedy is all about. We saw two essentials here. One was the opening line, and that is how you introduce the topic, and the second one was all about the small little jokes that you place throughout the comedy set. And now we come to the third element. The third element is all about transitioning between the short conversational bridges that connect one joke to the other, right? So how can you transition between one joke to the other? Yes, so in our example, again, let us look at this. I have some slides missing here. Just give me 2 seconds. That we had there, the Uber driver looking at the navigation app and then actually driving through a pedestrian walkway. Now, if we connect that joke to the next scenario where we say, imagine the car stumbling down the stairs and the lady passenger thrusting her head out of the window and screaming at a vegetable vendor who is there nearby to lower the price of the juicy tomatoes. Now, that's again going to be an absurd scenario here, right? We have another funny character come into our comedy set, which is the lady passenger, and she has thrust her neck out of the window and she's shouting at the vendor at maybe sitting nearby in that pedestrian walkway, and she's asking to lower the price of that juicy tomato. Yes, so here again we are transitioning between the joke which we have already told our audience about the car stumbling down the stairs, and now we are introducing another new character, a fresh face to our comedy set. Yes, so that's how you transition from one joke to the other, and this is definitely going to make your audience fall off from their seats, right? Now, after that joke there, now what is the next or the final set that we have, or the final essential element that we have? This is about the closer, right? Just like we saw how we need to introduce our comedy set, now we are going to see how we need to close the comedy set, right? So the final joke in your comedy set is again of prime importance, because that's how your audience is going to remember how your joke ended. Yes, so it might be a callback, that means a reference to an earlier joke that you spoke about, and wrap up your set always with a solid close that leaves the audience laughing all the way, right? So that's how you need to close the joke there. Now, how you can be again weaving that with an example, let me show you that. Here is the example for the closer. Now, again, imagine that you're still in the middle of that huge pedestrian staircase and belted tightly in your car. You're all nervous and freaked out because the circumstance calls for it, right? And right then, the the voice from that navigation app, it says you have reached your destination, and then you will be like, oh my god, this is again absurd, right? You are in the middle of nowhere in a pedestrian walkway, and the navigation app actually is telling you that you have reached your destination, right? So that could be an apt closer for the example that we have under consideration today, right? So this is how we gave you four different essentials, which are things that you really need to focus on. First one was the opening line, or how you're going to introduce your comedy set. Then second were small jokes that you have planted all throughout that comedy routine. Then we had how we can be transitioning between one joke to the other. And finally, the closer is of prime importance. You need to have a solid close at the ending, right? So these were the four essentials. And we had one particular Uber driver and the navigation app, the glitch in the navigation app, which caused all of this humor, right? So now, after all of these essentials, let's move ahead to the next segment, which is the synonymous word freaked out, right? Before we move ahead, let me also come and see some of my comments here in the chat box. RJ Gamer giving me all sorts of emojis here, the love emoji. Thanks a lot for that. Um, Really overwhelming to get all of these love emojis from you. And Farah Aziz asks me about the topic that we have. Okay, so Farah Aziz, let me tell you that this is the stand-up comedy vertical, and we are exploring how we can be writing jokes all by ourselves. Yes, and the subtopic for the day is topical humor. That means humor that relies on current affairs and news events that are the talk of the town during a particular time. Yes, so that is what we have here. And Devi Prasad gives me the synonym for freaked out, which is aggrieved. That is correct. And we can also say concerned or tensed, right? So these could be the synonymous words or similar word meanings for freaked out, right? And with that, let's move ahead to our next segment. So, yes, the next segment is quiz time. And brace yourselves for all of the questions that I have for my viewers here. The first question is, who painted the Mona Lisa? Okay, so answers in the chat box. General knowledge questions coming your way. Let me see who all has the correct answers. Who painted the Mona Lisa? Waiting for the answers here. That is correct. What's the full name? Correct again. Okay, so yes, got a couple of answers which are correct. And thanks a lot for that, Devi Prasad. You're quite there. I can give that to you. So, yes, the name of the painter was Leonardo da Vinci, right? And a famous painter. And let's move ahead to the next quiz question. Who invented the telephone? If you remember your GK lessons, then you're going to give me correct answers. Person who invented the telephone. And that's how we got should I tell you a clue here? Maybe that's from the name of that inventor is how we got bell associated with a telephone. This is the last question in our quiz time. And that is correct again. It is Graham Bell, Alexander Graham Bell, right? So, with that, we move ahead to our next episode. I'm sorry, the next segment. And yes, glitches like this is what causes humor, isn't it? Right. So, let's move ahead to expert tips on establishing the essentials. All correct answers in the chat box. Alexander Graham Bell is the correct answer. Thanks again. And moving ahead to the expert tips, let me give you the first expert tip that we have here, which is you can always restructure your 2 minute act into 5 minutes. That is, elongate your comedy set. And let me tell you that in Judd Apatow's scripts, you can observe that he always simply talks about the protagonist of his comedy set within the first 10 minutes of his opening. And that's how he starts his comedy routine, right? So you can also use that same concept for your stand-up act. You can also look for the Judd Apatow's Netflix series, and check out, have a keen observation on how these various stand-up comedians perform, right? So this is one expert tip. The second expert tip that we have here is, what you can do is you can always try talking about the jokes, maybe performing your jokes in front of your near and dear ones before you finally test the waters, right? So do not keep mulling over your joke, but you can actually bring it out into the open in front of your near and dear ones, who are going to be you're going to be comfortable around them, right? So you can try out your jokes in front of them, and they can be your ultimate critique and tell you how your jokes land. Yes. So this is how you can practice your jokes before you take it out to strangers in the audience, right? And this is again one expert tip. Even if you do not want to do it in front of your near and dear ones, another thing that I can tell you is, which really works, is you can always try any of the public speaking activities. You can try practicing that standing up in front of a mirror. Yes, even that works really well. So remember all of these expert tips. Fatima Rahman gives me a like here. Thanks for that, Fatima. And let's move ahead to the next segment that we have here, which is decipher the idiom, right? So the first idiom that we have for today is to laugh at. Now, what it means is when someone chuckles at something, or chuckles at another person, or maybe ridicules them, then you say, then you can be using this idiom, which is to laugh at. And how you can be using that in a sentence is, I couldn't help but laugh at Luke's new cowboy hat. He is in no way an actual cowboy, right? So that's how people make fun of or ridicule someone, and that's where you can be using this idiom, to laugh at, right? And with that, let's move ahead to our next segment, which is frame the fun part. Okay, so let's see what are the three important elements which is really going to amplify the fun in our comedy set. And these three elements are the characters, the situation, or the conflict, maybe, and the setting as well. Yes. So let's delve deeper into each of these elements here. And I'm also going to relate it to the one scenario that we saw at the starting of the episode, where we saw about this Uber driver having a glitchy navigation app, and how humor came out of that, right? So let's try and relate that situation with all of these elements. The first element that we have is the character. So the characters in our comedy set definitely have to be funny. Only then we will have a funny comedy routine, isn't it? So we must always try to have comic characters in our comedy set. And for example, like we can see in our scenario there, that we had a person who blindly followed the GPS, knowing that in fact it is nothing but a gadget, or maybe an app, and it is not a real guide, right? Similarly, we also had another funny character join into our joke set, which was the lady who was the passenger, and she was actually not, she was least bothered about what the mishappening was, and she was busy buying tomatoes, right? So this is how you can add funny characters to your comedy set, which is really going to make the whole comedy routine more and more humorous, right? And the second element that we have here is the situation, right? So let me tell you, you can describe the situation in great detail, no matter how gray they sound, how gloomy it sounds. You can project them in a funny way. For example, the reaction of the pedestrians watching this whole uh, episode in front of their eyes, that could be something which it gives you the laughs, right? So try your best about being hilarious. Scratch out a central theme, some kind of a central conflict, and see to it that that particular conflict drives your plot all throughout. Yes. So situations and conflicts can again come to your rescue when you want to make people laugh. And the third element that we have here is the setting, right? So how can you be choosing the setting for your plot? Like in the scenario that we had, we tried to portray that scene funnily by being in the middle of maybe a city in America. We saw we spoke about San Francisco, right? So we were in the middle of an urban city in America on on a gorgeous sunny day with a lot of people who contributed to that plot, right? Not only the two main characters, the Uber driver and the funny passenger, but we also had the people there in the pedestrian walking who added on to and contributed to that plot there. Yes. So that's how you can be thinking of how you can creatively form a setting which will again amplify the whole humor that you have written in your comedy set. Yes. So these were the three elements in plotting the plot: the characters, the setting, and the conflict or the situation, right? So if you start focusing on all of these elements, then you're definitely going to form some kind of a central theme which will take your or drive your plot further ahead. Yes. So after that fun framing part, let's move ahead to one of our next idioms, which is to laugh away at. Yes. So to laugh away at would have a hidden meaning, which means to continuously laugh at something or at someone. Yes. So example statement could be: the kids laughed away at the new cartoon comics their uncle brought home last night. Yes. So that means that the new cartoon comics was really fun and it was hilarious, and that's why the kids laughed away at it. Yes. So you need to definitely learn and understand all of these idioms so that you have form an impression with your audience, right? It's really an easy way of how you can be acing your public speaking or your communication skills as well, right? So jot down all of these idioms that you see in these episodes, and maybe try using them wherever appropriate, right? Gunjan says yes, and I'm glad that you are imbibing all of these tips and tricks that we bring to you. And with that, let me move ahead to another fun segment. We have a picture on the screen, and guess who this famous stand-up comedian is? Okay, let me give you some time to answer this question. And then quickly in the chat box, if you can name this famous comedian. And I already got the answer there. It's not the full name though, but I can give that to you. Yes, Varun gives me the correct answer. It is Aziz Ansari. And thanks a lot for that. Let's move ahead to some of the expert tips and tricks before we end our broadcast for today. So, the first trick that we have here is safest humor for you can be when you talk about personal stories, right? If you have a personal narrative that you bring on to these jokes or the scripts that you have written, then there is nothing like it, because they are guaranteed to be original, and it can be easily practiced and perfected. Yes. So as a creator, it is your job to make the audience excited and fascinated about a subject which is as real as it gets, right? So maybe you can talk about some experiences that you have had, and try and give a humorous side to it, right? That is one expert tip. And of course, talking about something that you have already gone through is going to be really easy, even. Yes. And the second expert tip that we have is to truly laugh. You must be able to take your pain and play with it. And this is a quote that was rightly said by Charlie Chaplin. While he likely didn't mean that customer pain points, but the same wisdom applies here. Yes. So these were some expert tips and tricks that you can be applying when you try to write your own comedy set. And before we end the broadcast, I have another interesting segment, which is locate the word. So I'm going to show you a letter maze, and you need to quickly give me all the hidden words. Let me tell you that all of these words are discussed in today's episode, and you need to have an eagle's vision to find them out in this letter maze. Here it is. So quickly in the chat box, if you can give me 4 words that are hidden in this maze. Okay. Itching is one word that I get there. Okay, pain is another word that is correct. Itching and pain. Fatima Rahman, Pooja Piyush Salwan, thanks a lot for the like. And similar repetitive answers coming up here. Let me showcase the answer. Two words that you have missed. One of them is vaccine, and we had itching. Then there is pain, and finally we have gray. So these were the words in our locate the words segment. Thanks a lot for the attempt. And let's move ahead into our next segment, which is at a glance. And quickly, I'm going to round up all the essentials that we learned in today's topical comedy subtopic, right? So we saw how we can be including the characters, the situation, and the settings, and inside some humor for our audience, and also the four crucial elements for our comedy set, which would be the opening or the introduction, all the different jokes that you have planted in the comedy set, and how you transition from one joke to another, and finally how well you close the set, right? So these are going to be prime, these are going to be of prime importance. Vaccine is one of the correct answers. Devi Prasad, I think I got your answer late. But yes, thanks again for all of the answers. And so now that you know how a topical comedy can be written, you might want to implement all the learnings that you had from today's episode and try your hand at writing a topical comedy script. Yes, with that we come to the end of our episode for today. For tomorrow, let me tell you, we are going to see another scenario in the same subtopic, which is topical comedy. So until the time we meet next tomorrow at 6 p.m. India time, I am Sapna Mahadevan signing out for today, and I would urge all of you to try writing a comedy script with topical comedy as the subtopic, and have a fun time. Yes. So see you all tomorrow at 6 p.m. India time. Bye bye.